One of the reasons why I came to CNN is that I wanted the challenge.
I came to cover a summit. I walked into a revolution.
Details are very sketchy at this moment. We are told that shots were fired at his party as he left the hotel.
The first question goes to Governor Dukakis.
As you know, there's been an earthquake out here, at least 6.5 on the Richter scale.
The most devastating story I've ever covered at CNN was the bombing of the federal office building in Oklahoma City.
The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
This is thunder, this is lightning, this is death, this is hell.
He was straight, to the point, asked a tough question.
Many people say, you should have finished him off when you had the chance. Why didn't you?
I don't know what they're going to do there at CNN, but I think they must know that in losing Bernie Shaw, they've lost an icon.
Much as he dislikes the term, Bernard Shaw is an icon. After 38 years on the air, he has emerged as one of the finest broadcast journalists of his generation. Among the very few faces and voices instantly recognizable across America and around the globe. So how do you get to the top? Start by asking someone who was already there.
I was in Hawaii doing a story about Pearl Harbor, and we were registered in the hotel. And the very first day we were there, I started getting notes in my box at the hotel to please call this Bernard Shaw. The second day came in, and the man at the desk said, "That man has been calling you, Mr. Shaw. He's sitting right over there, waiting for you to come in." Trapped me, you know. So there he is, and he turns out to be this sergeant in the Marine Corps, for heaven's sakes. And right away he said, "Mr. Cronkite, I have to talk to you. I have to be a journalist, and I have to find out how I do that."
On weekends, when the rest of us were running around Waikiki Beach chasing girls, Bernie spent a lot of time in the cubicle where we slept next to our bunks, at a desk, reading.
Determination, evident from the start. Ray Lopez remembers the focus and intensity of his Marine buddy.
He'd come up to me with a towel or a coffee cup or whatever, mimicking a microphone, and he would stick it in front of me and start asking me all kinds of questions. And the guy could talk for endless.
Bernie Shaw, Leslie Stahl, and I were so low on the totem pole when we first came to CBS News, we didn't have desks. We were very upset about it. So we complained, and they finally put these little kiddie desks. Believe me, they were little kiddie desks in a hallway. And then the other correspondents, the senior correspondents, would complain that we were cooking chitlins and egg rolls and knishes. I mean, they had the audacity to say that. But then when we started getting good assignments and breaking stories, that shut them up.
Good assignments like Watergate at CBS. And breaking stories like the mass suicide in Jonestown, Guyana. Covering that story for ABC, Bernie and his crew came dangerously close to stalling their plane as they captured the images that brought the horror home. From ABC, a leap of faith, to Ted Turner's wild experiment, CNN.
I had been the ABC bureau chief, and when I left ABC, I had my eye on a very few good men and women, and he was at the top of my list.
The number one challenge is not just to tell you what and why things happen here, but to explain what developments mean to you and how they'll affect your pocketbook.
Bernie was just an extremely solid journalist, correspondent, who I knew had this anchor itch.
President Carter says the housing and automobile industries, in fact, the entire national economy, will be stimulated by a reduction in the inflation rate.
The qualities that made him our anchor, our rock. A manner and a voice that make every word believable. The coolest demeanor in the hottest situations. A cut-to-the-quick interviewing style. And at his core, a powerful combination of journalistic integrity and pure instinct.
This I'll never forget. We were in the newsroom, and you heard the crackling of the radio. All I heard was down. I believe the transmission said rawhide down. and Bernie's saying, let's get on the air now.
Minutes ago, approximately 4 shots were fired at the president as he was leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel.
With Bernie at the anchor desk, CNN proved that it could compete with the networks on the biggest story of the year, and then beat them by getting it right.
All of the other 3 networks, their anchormen, went on the air announcing the death of Jim Brady. Bernard Shaw did not do so.
We're told that White House Press Secretary Jim Brady was shot in the head. What his condition is, we just don't know at this point.
I'm just below him, writing these increasingly desperate notes saying everybody says Jim Brady is dead, including CNN sources, and I'm passing them up. Didn't faze him. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't say Jim Brady was dead.
He says it does not look that good. It does not look good for Jim Brady.
20 hours after the shots were fired, I say to Bernie, I have to ask you, why didn't you kill Jim Brady? Why didn't you say he was dead? And he looked at me and he said, simple. The source that was telling us and everybody else that he was dead wasn't at the hospital.
Bernie has proven himself a master of breaking news, but when the situation also called for careful thought and preparation, no one is more thorough.
I guess in order to illustrate Bernie's ranking among fellow journalists in terms of his credentials to cover politics, it might be best to look at his question of Michael Dukakis.
By agreement between the candidates, the first question goes to Governor Dukakis.
Bernie worked for days on the right question, with one mission in mind. He wanted those 2 men to commit news. He finally hit upon a question so powerful that it helped in many minds to sway their decision about who to vote for.
Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life.
As soon as he got the answer out, he was done for the debate. I think you can make a very plausible case that it was maybe one of the most revealing questions ever asked in a presidential debate.
Fellow journalists will recall Bernie's ability to deliver the news fast and straight and ask tough but fair questions.
If you had not allowed missiles in Cuba, would relations with the United States be different, better?
But for many viewers, he will always be known as a calm voice in times of chaos. Tiananmen Square, 1989.
We had all been up for days. Bernie had been on the air with me and the rest of us hour after hour reporting on the drama in the square.
The situation in Tiananmen Square is that it is a standoff.
Suddenly word came that martial law had been declared and that the Chinese were ordering us off the air. Outside, troops were surrounding Beijing, the outskirts of Beijing. None of us had any notion of whether they might at some point simply show up in the hotel, bayonets drawn, and force us.
We were just told by the government of China that about 58 minutes from now, the government will pull the plug.
And at the final moment before the plug was pulled, we were able, after much browbeating and negotiating back and forth with the Chinese, to give Bernie a chance to sign off and close this whole operation down.
In my 26 years in this business, I've never seen anything like this. For all of the hard-working men and women of CNN, goodbye from Beijing.
It was just an absolutely class act, cool under fire and on top of the subject.
That experience proved invaluable. Nearly 2 years later, Bernie, along with reporters John Holloman and Peter Arnett, made television history from the 9th floor of Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel.
The first moments of the bombing, when the skies were lit up, I was in a room across the hall. I raced for the microphone, and here was Bernie. Atlanta, come to Baghdad, come to Baghdad.
Skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
He had the microphone first, the instinct to broadcast, to be there. He didn't waver. He didn't hesitate. Wham.
No one knew whether our boys of Baghdad would survive that night. 1 billion people watched around the world, and CNN, as we know it, was born.
They were really a terrific combo, Bernie and John and Peter. Bernie brought that calm and that stable approach you look for from the consummate anchor who's a consummate journalist.
How did CNN manage to stay on the air during all this?
I'm just thinking about whether I want to candidly answer your question.
All right. I remember saying that before the Persian Gulf War, CNN was a little engine that thought it could, but that night it demonstrated that it was a full-fledged network and a first-class news-gathering organization in the eyes of just about everyone.
I think the best source of how careful we have been is listening to the CNN reporters who are watching it unfold.
His job was to get out of me as much as he could to tell the story to the American people of what we were doing. And I always knew that in working with Bernie, it would be that kind of professional friendship where when I needed a hit and when I earned a hit, when I deserved a hit, friendship had nothing to do with it. It was business, it was professionalism.
And like Colin Powell, Bernie is a pioneer.
Bernie's legacy, and we cannot ignore it, is that he is an African American who broke the barrier, who became one of the big four. He paved the way for so many people, and I'm not talking about just African Americans. I think all of us, all the minorities, Bernie was there for us.
When Bernie was a young radio reporter in Chicago, he was interviewing Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And after the brief interview was over, Dr. King took him aside and encouraged him to pursue the profession of journalism, saying to Bernie Shaw, "We need more like you."
A quiet word of encouragement from Dr. King to a young radio reporter, and from a famous anchor to a new technician.
I passed him in the hall. He took maybe one step past me, turned around, said, "Excuse me." He said, is this your first day here? I said, "Yes, sir. How you doing, Mr. Shaw? My name's Maurice." Came up, shook my hand, said, welcome to the team. Look forward to working with you. It meant a lot to make me feel welcome here, and that's how Bernie was.
Bernie's legacy? A shining example to young journalists of all backgrounds. The man who tamed a chaotic new medium, 24-hour news. The first voice we heard in times of crisis.
I do not think one terrorist bomb with all the carnage will shatter either the faith or the future of the people of Oklahoma.
Bernard Shaw set the standard, then upheld it through earthquakes, political conventions, impeachment, debates, and all-night election dramas.
It's not over. It simply is not over.
Nothing could shake his foundation. He was always calm, clear, concise. If you told him the world was coming to an end, he would still report it factually.
You got to have it in the gut to be a good journalist, a good reporter, and a good editor, a good writer, a good broadcaster. And he did all of that.
Cronkite was a great broadcaster, Edward Murrow, great broadcasters. But look at what Bernie Shaw's done. The hours he has spent on the air. Bernie has done it all. I mean, he is the complete broadcaster.
We're still in shock. On the day Bernie announced his plan to step back, the entire newsroom, writers, producers, and editors all stood to applaud. Some cried. Many of them are young. They, like all of us, look up to Bernard Shaw, as that Marine once looked up to Walter Cronkite. That inspiration is a gift we can never hope to repay.
Bernie built this network. As long as CNN's on the air, that's going to be Bernie's legacy.